step back in time, and rediscover the tools, habits, and heartfelt gifts Grandpa cherished every Father's Day. These traditions defined his era, and some still carry lessons worth holding on to today. No matter the weather, Grandpa pulled out his crisp Sunday shirt on Father's Day. Usually short-sleeved, often plaid or pastel, it had been ironed the night before or carefully hung all week. It wasn't for show. It was a small act of pride. Even in modest homes, dressing up signaled the day was special. He might have worn it to church or just to the backyard grill. Kids could tug at the hem or spill lemonade on it, but it didn't matter. That shirt was part of the ritual. It was his armor of dignity, a quiet message. Today, I am honored. Over time, that shirt faded, replaced by newer ones, or folded into memory drawers. But everyone remembered the scent of aftershave on the collar and the way it clung slightly in the summer breeze. In a world of t-shirts and tech, the simple act of dressing up meant something. To Grandpa, Father's Day wasn't casual, it was sacred. Every Father's Day, without fail, Grandpa had his trusty pocketknife clipped to his belt or nestled deep in his khakis. It wasn't for display, it was for usefulness. He might slice open gift wrap, cut twine for a makeshift swing, or whittle a stick into a toy while the kids played nearby. That knife was a symbol, reliability, preparedness, and tradition. Maybe it had initials engraved or came from a hardware store with a story. Some kids were even gifted their first blade by Grandpa on Father's Day, with strict warnings and pride all wrapped into one. Today, pocket knives are less common, swapped for multi-tools or forgotten altogether. But in his day, that blade wasn't just sharp, it was meaningful. It stood for resourcefulness, self-reliance, and care. A man who carried a knife was ready to fix a toy, cut a loose thread, or open the next adventure. On Father's Day, Grandpa made sure it was right there in his pocket. Father's Day always started with Grandpa's signature grooming routine, aftershave and a pocket comb. He stood in front of the mirror, smoothing his hair, dabbing Old Spice or Brut on his cheeks. The scent alone could fill a room. A wave of nostalgia so strong it still lingers in old shirts and photo albums. He didn't use fancy products, just the tried and true stuff he'd been buying for decades. The comb usually came from his top drawer or his shirt pocket, well worn, but never far from reach. He wasn't showing off, he was showing up. The smell of aftershave and the click of that comb against his scalp were quiet declarations. I care about today. It was for the photos, the hugs, the meal someone made for him. He wanted to be presentable for the people he loved. And while today's grooming habits are more varied, those small rituals were part of the man, part of the day, and part of the legacy.
Next, we'll step into the garage, where some of Grandpa's most beloved Father's Day traditions were covered in grease, grit, and a whole lot of love.
Before brunch, gifts, or card reading, Grandpa was out in the yard, tinkering with his push mower. On Father's Day, he never skipped this ritual. He checked the oil, tightened a belt, maybe even sharpened the blades. Why? Because to him, caring for the land, no matter how small, was part of being a father. Kids would watch him on the driveway, grease on his hands, kneeling beside a machine older than some of his children. Sometimes he'd explain what each part did, turning the moment into a garage-side lesson. The mower wasn't just for cutting grass. It was his version of control, stewardship, and pride. Even if no one noticed how neat the lawn looked later, Grandpa did. Today, many outsource the task or use electric gadgets. But back then, it was all manual and deeply personal. On Father's Day, while others rested, Grandpa did the opposite. Because for him, love often sounded like a humming Briggs & Stratton engine. Grandpa had a mug, not just any mug, his mug. It might have said, "World's Best Dad" in faded print, or featured a chipped logo from the feed store. But every Father's Day, it came out like clockwork, filled with piping hot coffee, black, no sugar. It stayed in his hand as he opened cards or watched the grandkids tumble through the yard. That mug held more than caffeine. It held decades of morning routines, quiet reflections, and strength brewed dark and steady. You didn't touch it. You didn't clean it. It lived on the counter, near the sink, or on the table where he read the paper. Sometimes Father's Day meant a new mug, but he still reached for the old one, because that was the one that fit, the one that felt like him. Today, we swap mugs often, or drink from disposable cups. But Grandpa's mug? That was a lifelong companion, a symbol of his pace, presence, and place at the table. Did your grandpa have a favorite mug, tool, or token he never parted with on Father's Day? Share it in the comments. We'd love to hear the stories behind those small treasures. Every Father's Day afternoon, Grandpa slipped away to the garage, not to hide, but to tinker. Whether it was fixing a cracked handle, sanding a board, or checking spark plugs, he always had a little project going. The garage wasn't a man cave, it was a temple of usefulness. Pegboards lined with hand tools, jars of nails, coffee cans of screws. The air smelled like sawdust and WD-40. Sometimes the grandkids were invited in, handed a broom or screwdriver, and taught something real. That was Grandpa's gift. His time, his knowledge, his rhythm. Working on Father's Day wasn't a burden. It was joy. That hour in the garage was where he felt most like himself. And if he emerged with dirty hands and a repaired hinge, that was his version of a celebration. Today's DIY looks different, but back then, it meant connection, creativity, and quiet satisfaction. The garage was his kingdom. On Father's Day, he ruled it with a smile and a socket wrench. Coming up, the classic gadgets Grandpa swore by, a car he babied like family, and one little metal box that held a world of memories. Before Bluetooth speakers and streaming playlists, Grandpa had an AM/FM radio, usually a compact unit with a big dial and scratchy speakers. On Father's Day, it played softly in the background, ball games, old country tunes, or talk shows. Maybe it lived on his workbench, or sat on the back porch near his rocker. The static, the crackling signal, the warm hum. It was the soundtrack of his day. Even if the signal faded, he fiddled with the antenna until it came back. Music or play-by-play commentary kept him company while he tinkered, grilled, or sipped his second cup of coffee. That radio wasn't just entertainment. It was a ritual, a bridge to the outside world, and a thread tying him to quieter times. Today's soundtracks come through phones, but back then, his radio was all he needed. On Father's Day, as laughter rang from inside the house, his little box buzzed and whispered, a loyal companion through decades of sunny Sundays and quiet afternoons. Every Father's Day, he polished his shoes or boots. Sitting near a sunny window or in the garage, he brought out the old tin of black or brown polish, a rag, and a soft brush. It was meditative, slow, purposeful, filled with care. Whether he wore them out to dinner, church, or just around the yard, those shoes shined. Not for vanity, but for respect, for tradition, for himself. Some of us still remember the smell of the polish, the rhythm of the brush strokes, and the creak of leather as he slipped them on. In a world that now embraces sneakers and slides, Grandpa stood a little taller in those polished shoes. On Father's Day, he reminded everyone, without saying a word, that presentation mattered, not because others expected it, but because he expected it of himself. His shoes weren't just clean, they reflected who he was, steady, timeless, and always prepared to walk the walk. To Grandpa, his car wasn't just transportation, it was pride on wheels. On Father's Day, after breakfast and before gifts, he'd wipe the windshield, check the oil, and shine the chrome with a soft rag. Even if it was decades old, that car gleamed like new. Maybe it was a two-tone Chevy, a rust-dappled pickup, or a sensible sedan with plastic seat covers. Whatever it was, it mattered. He didn't need a car wash. He needed a hose, a sponge, and elbow grease. He might tell stories about road trips, the first time he drove it home, or how he got it for a steal. Some years, the family would even gift him new seat covers or fuzzy dice. But mostly, Father's Day was just another reason to care for something he loved. Today, cars are upgraded often and cleaned by subscription. But Grandpa's car? It was part of the family, waxed, loved, and always ready for the next ride. Still ahead, one tiny metal box that held his whole life, a Sunday ritual with sacred snacks and the most loyal friend at his side. No batteries required. Even if no one went fishing, Grandpa never forgot his tackle box on Father's Day. It might have sat at the corner of the porch or rode in the back of his truck, just in case. The box itself was usually metal or dented plastic, scratched from years of use but still functional. Inside, hooks, lures, line, a pocket knife, old receipts, maybe a weathered photo of a big catch. Sometimes he'd open it up just to reorganize it, letting the grandkids peek in like it was a treasure chest. It wasn't about catching anything, it was about being ready. That box represented peace, patience, and possibility. Even if life was hard, fishing was simple. Wait, watch, breathe. Today, fewer people fish, and tackle boxes are high-tech or forgotten. But Grandpa's box? It was never far. On Father's Day, it reminded him of mornings by the water, the joy of a tug on the line, and the quiet belief that something good was always just beneath the surface. Did your grandfather have a tackle box, a garage drawer, or a favorite toolkit he always brought out on Father's Day? Tell us what treasures he kept inside. We'd love to hear. Grandpa didn't check his phone for the time. He wore it. On Father's Day, his watch wasn't just functional, it was ceremonial. If he owned a pocket watch, it came out of a tiny vest pocket, polished and heavy with meaning. If he wore a Timex, it was likely leather-strapped, with a sun-faded face and stories behind every scratch. It might have been a retirement gift or something he bought after his first big promotion. Either way, he tapped it, wound it, and trusted it. Watches marked the time between breakfast and BBQ, between church and chores, and while the day slowed down for celebration, Grandpa always knew what hour it was. Today, watches are mostly fashion statements, or forgotten altogether. But back then, they were a symbol of responsibility, punctuality, and pride. On Father's Day, Grandpa never left the house without his, because for him, being on time wasn't just polite, it was part of who he was. On Father's Day, one of Grandpa's greatest joys was the Sunday newspaper, big, rustling, and packed with stories. He'd sit in his favorite chair, coffee in hand, and unfold it section by section: comics, sports, classifieds, the front page. If you were lucky, you could snuggle beside him and read along, or giggle at Garfield while he scanned the headlines. The paper wasn't background noise, it was sacred time. Even when gifts were unwrapped and grandkids played nearby, he'd take 20 quiet minutes to catch up with the world. Sometimes he'd read aloud, sometimes he'd grumble at the editorials, but he always finished it, fold by fold. Today, many papers have vanished or gone digital. But back then, the ink smudged your fingers, and the smell of newsprint mixed with morning coffee. On Father's Day, it reminded Grandpa of his routine, his wisdom, and his steady presence in a fast-moving world. The paper didn't just inform, it grounded him. Up next, a folding chair that never left the trunk, the snack tin that always came out, and a Father's Day tradition straight from the back porch. It creaked, it sagged. But Grandpa's folding lawn chair was as essential as the man himself on Father's Day. Usually stashed in the garage or trunk, it came out for cookouts, fireworks, or just watching the grandkids run across the lawn. It wasn't pretty. Faded canvas, rusted joints, maybe some duct tape on one of the arms, but it was his throne. Planted in the shade with a cold drink in the side pocket, he ruled the yard from that chair. Sometimes he napped in it. Sometimes he told stories from it. Always, he observed the family from it, quietly proud. Today, collapsible chairs are everywhere, but none carry the weight of that old frame that had seen graduations, campouts, and countless Sundays. On Father's Day, his chair wasn't just a seat, it was tradition. Unfolding it was like unfurling a flag. It meant he was here, he was home, and he was watching over all he loved. You knew it was Father's Day when Grandpa brought out the blue tin of mixed nuts, not the fancy kind, just lightly salted, sometimes with more peanuts than anything else. He'd open it with a twist, set it on the side table or picnic blanket, and snack slowly while everyone else buzzed around him. The kids would sneak cashews. He'd fake protest, but offer the whole thing with a wink. That tin meant he was relaxing, enjoying the moment. It might have come as part of his gift, or maybe he picked it up himself at the store, just in case. Some years it was roasted peanuts in a glass jar, or sunflower seeds in a bowl, but the nut tin was classic. Today we snack on protein bars or air-fried chips, but Grandpa kept it simple. The ritual of cracking open that tin wasn't about flavor, it was about continuity. A salty, simple way to mark the day and pass the time. As the day wound down, Grandpa always found his way to the front or back porch rocker, a soft, steady rhythm to end a full Father's Day. He didn't need conversation, just the creak of wood, the buzz of cicadas, and the glow of a setting sun. A grandkid might curl up in his lap. Someone would bring him a slice of pie, and he'd rock, quietly taking it all in. He wasn't one for big speeches or over-the-top celebrations. That chair, that view, that moment, that was everything. The porch was his sanctuary, his observatory, and his thank you all in one. No matter the size of the house, Grandpa's chair was always the best seat. Today, we chase stimulation, but Grandpa chased stillness. On Father's Day, the Porch Rocker reminded us that peace isn't found in noise, but in presence. Rocking slowly, surrounded by family, he felt whole, and in that moment, so did everyone else. Did your grandpa have a favorite chair, porch spot, or end-of-day tradition on Father's Day? Share it with us. We'd love to hear where your memories rocked gently to life. On Father's Day, Grandpa sometimes put on his tool belt, even if there wasn't a project to fix. Hammer, tape measure, a pencil tucked behind his ear. It was more than gear. It was identity. He might walk the yard with it, just checking things, or tighten a loose fence slat while chatting about the weather. The belt creaked with age, its pouches worn smooth by decades of use. He didn't wear it to show off. He wore it because tools were part of him. They reminded him he could fix, build, restore. Even if the day was for rest, Grandpa often chose usefulness. And that quiet presence, the kind that notices a squeaky hinge or a dripping hose, was part of his love language. Today, we hire out or rely on smart devices. But Grandpa believed in knowing his tools and being ready to use them. On Father's Day, the belt didn't say, "I'm working." It said, "I'm here, I care, let me help." It wasn't just tradition, it was preparedness. Grandpa never forgot his handkerchief on Father's Day. Tucked neatly in his shirt or pants pocket, it was a plain white square, or maybe checkered cotton, soft from years of washes. It served 1,000 purposes, wiping sweat from his brow while grilling, cleaning a smudge off a grandkid's cheek, drying a sudden tear from a story told a little too tenderly. Sometimes, he'd wave it like a flag, or pull it out like a magician to amuse little ones. The handkerchief wasn't flashy, but it was classic Grandpa. Practical, present, always thinking ahead. Today, tissues and wet wipes fill that role, but something about a cloth square, folded with intention, feels more personal. It wasn't disposable, neither was he. On Father's Day, when his hand went to his pocket, you knew it was there. Not just to clean, but to comfort. A simple square of fabric that somehow held generations of love. Even if someone else planned the meal, Grandpa manned the grill on Father's Day. No exceptions. It could be a charcoal kettle or a rusted propane setup, but that grill was his domain. He'd clean the grates, tap the tongs twice, and proclaim, "Now we're cooking." The smoke, the sizzle, the occasional flare-up, this was a symphony only he could conduct. He wasn't showy about it, but everyone knew. Don't touch Grandpa's grill. He had his rhythm. Burgers flipped once, dogs turned slowly, foil-wrapped corn rotated like clockwork. Sometimes he'd wear a novelty apron, king of the grill, but often just a tucked-in shirt and firm concentration. The meal was his gift to the family, even on the day meant to celebrate him. Today, grilling is trendier. Pellet smokers, apps, gourmet rubs. But Grandpa didn't need all that. Just a hot fire, his old tools, and people waiting nearby. Because for him, food cooked over flames wasn't just a meal, it was a legacy. Coming up, a trusty dog, a metal cooler full of memories, and one final moment Grandpa always saved for last. Father's Day wasn't complete without Grandpa's dog, usually older, loyal, and always a few steps behind. The dog might lie under the porch while Grandpa rocked, or sit patiently beside the grill, eyes tracking every motion. Sometimes it was a shepherd, sometimes a mutt, always a companion. The dog didn't beg, didn't bark much, just watched, waited, protected. Grandpa talked to him like an old friend. "Hot out today, huh?" Or, "They're getting big, aren't they?" The dog seemed to nod in agreement. He'd been there through birthdays, holidays, and hard years. Father's Day was just another day they shared quietly. Today, dogs are often dressed up or posted online, but Grandpa's dog didn't need attention. He was part of the rhythm, a piece of the day. And when you saw Grandpa scratch that graying head or share a leftover piece of meat, you realized something sacred. This wasn't just a pet. It was his shadow, heart, and history, all rolled into one. Grandpa never arrived empty-handed, and on Father's Day, he always brought out the metal cooler. Big, dented, usually red or blue, it clanked when opened. Inside, glass bottles of root beer, cream soda, or orange pop floating in icy water. He'd pop the cap off with a worn church key and hand you one, cold, fizzy, and better than any store-bought treat. He didn't need fancy drinks or cocktails. That root beer, sipped in a folding chair or on the porch, was perfection. It tasted like summer, celebration, and simplicity. Maybe the cooler had a squeaky lid or a handle held on by wire, but it never failed. And neither did he. Today we drink from sleek cans and chilled wine tumblers, but nothing compares to the weight of that cold glass bottle, passed from Grandpa's strong hands. On Father's Day, he didn't just serve soda, he served tradition. A toast to time, memories, and the man who always kept things cool. Did your grandpa have a cooler, grill, or furry best friend that made Father's Day unforgettable? Share your memories. We'd love to hear how he kept tradition and the root beer flowing. Grandpa's wallet was never flashy, but it told a story. A creased brown leather rectangle, soft from use, with stitching barely holding it together after decades of loyalty. Inside, not much money, but photos, old business cards, a social security card worn nearly transparent, and perhaps a note written by Grandma long ago. On Father's Day, he might have opened it to show a grandkid's photo or the worn driver's license with a younger man's face. Sometimes, he'd slip a $5 bill into someone's hand and say, "Don't tell your folks." The wallet wasn't just an accessory, it was a history book, a quiet archive of what he valued. Today, we have digital wallets and sleek minimalist designs, but Grandpa's bulging, lived-in wallet, it went everywhere. On Father's Day, it rested next to his coffee, his keys, and his pride, because even if the world changed, that old wallet reminded him, and all of us, where he'd been, what he'd earned, and who he loved. Whether it was horseshoes, washers, cornhole, or lawn darts, Grandpa had his game, and he never forgot it on Father's Day. He didn't cheat, he didn't gloat, but somehow, he always won. The game began after lunch, usually with him pretending to struggle, only to land a perfect toss when it counted. Grandkids would groan, adults would laugh, and Grandpa would grin just wide enough. He didn't play for glory, he played for connection. Sometimes the game was handed down, something he played with his own father, something crafted by hand, or taught in a gravel driveway. The lawn wasn't regulation, the scoring was flexible, the joy was real. Today we have video games and phone apps, but back then a few beanbags and a sunny patch of grass were enough to build memories that stuck. On Father's Day, the tradition continued, one perfect toss at a time, and no matter who kept score, Grandpa always walked away the quiet champion. Even amid the laughter and activity, Grandpa always made time for one quiet moment with Grandma on Father's Day. It might have been a hand squeeze across the dinner table, a shared look from the porch swing, or a whispered thank you while washing dishes side by side. No fanfare, no spotlight, just a moment of recognition, because behind every celebrated father was often a strong, steady partner who helped raise the kids, manage the chaos, and build the life being honored. Grandpa never forgot that. Some years he gave her flowers or shared his dessert. Other years, it was just presence, quiet and full of meaning. Today, we post photos and write captions, but Grandpa didn't need the internet to show appreciation. He lived it. And on Father's Day, that simple gesture toward Grandma said more than any gift could. It said, "I remember, I'm grateful, and I know I couldn't have done this without you." Before the first bite, before forks hit plates, Grandpa said grace, a simple, heartfelt prayer over the Father's Day meal. It might have been long or short, recited from memory, or spoken softly and improvised. Heads bowed, silence filled the room. For a few seconds the noise paused, and gratitude took center stage. Sometimes he thanked God for health, family, and getting through another year. Other times, he choked up remembering those who were no longer at the table. It wasn't performative. It was real. Everyone, whether religious or not, felt the weight and warmth of those few words. Today, we often rush into meals, distracted by screens or side conversations. But Grandpa reminded us to pause, to be thankful not just for food, but for togetherness. On Father's Day, that small prayer grounded the day. It reminded everyone that behind the jokes, the grilling, and the gifts, there was something sacred in simply being here, together, again. And finally, one last tradition Grandpa never forgot. Not a thing to hold, but a message he always made sure to leave behind. At some point, maybe while tucking you into a hug, maybe as you packed up to leave, Grandpa said it, "I'm proud of you." It didn't matter how big or small your accomplishments were. You could have brought home straight A's or just helped clean the porch, he noticed. That was his final gift on Father's Day. A few quiet words that landed deeper than any speech. He didn't always say "I love you," but when he said he was proud, you knew what he meant. And somehow, he found a way to say it to everyone. His kids, his grandkids, maybe even his son-in-law, who finally fixed the fence right. Today, affirmation is often loud, posted, liked, but Grandpa's words came slow, steady, and unforgettable. On Father's Day, he gave us the strength of his pride, unspoken most days, but crystal clear when it counted. And it's those words, softly spoken, that many of us still hear echoing long after the day is done.
What's something your grandpa always said or did on Father's Day that still stays with you today? Share it below. We'd love to honor those unforgettable gestures together.
I hope you enjoyed this heartfelt tribute to the timeless ways Grandpa celebrated Father's Day. Which tradition resonated most with you? Let's keep these stories alive, one memory at a time. Until next time.